Alright, let's take a look at, some would say, the only flat panels worth owning. 4K 3D TVs. Now 4K 3D TVs are more rare than most regular 1080p 3D TVs. They came at a middle time period at the tail end of 3D in the home being a thing that was attempted, and the beginning of 4K TVs. There's that sweet spot right there. Some were active and some were passive. And today I'm going to show you two that I tested out. One is the Samsung UN55JU7100. It's a 55-inch. This isn't one of the curved ones, which was a gimmick. And I know people call 3D a gimmick, but curved screen, personally, I think that's a gimmick, because it's not like content is actually made for it, like with some old large format that have actual curvature built into the picture. This is just curving a flat picture. But anyway, this is the flat version, normal, and the Samsungs, of course, use active battery-powered glasses. I bought it used off Facebook Marketplace, and I tried a couple of different types of active glasses. I didn't actually use Samsung glasses. I got more affordable ones. The first ones I got were these big guys, Quantum 3D, and these, they're fully charged and everything, but they had some sync issues. I mean, it worked, but it was just ever so slightly off. Just ever so slightly, where it really made it annoying to watch, and it wasn't as good as it could be. And these are Bluetooth glasses, by the way. That's the types it used. And then I got Syntron glasses. I'm not sure if it goes by different brands, because I know I've seen this shape before, this general mold. Anyway, these are the cheaper ones, less comfortable, obviously, smaller lenses, but they sync appropriately. And they hold a nice long charge, too, so yeah, they work pretty well. So anyway, the remote is interesting. It's curved. It has the Smart Hub button on the bottom there. That's shaped like the logo. If you notice the button called Pointer, you touch that and it actually works like a mouse. You just put your thumb on that and you'll see a mouse appear on the screen that you can move around, and then actually press it in all the way and it clicks. Now this has smart apps built into it like many TVs do, but the nice thing is that you can access Vudu 3D. So I know that can be a very spotty as far as compatibility goes, but here you can watch or rent a number of titles, some of which are exclusive to Vudu 3D. Older titles and obscure shorts like some of the Toy Story tunes, a Tangled sequel, and even newer stuff up to the Super Mario Brothers movie, which got released on Vudu out of nowhere, but no Blu-ray. Blu-ray 3D, that is. Is there any other Blu-ray? It has an interesting function that I haven't seen on other TVs, that you can actually adjust the picture size. Like you can change the height, the width, and this is rarely used, but it has come in handy. Such as, generally there's functions to, for instance, crop 4:3 content to 16:9. Normally I wouldn't do that, but sometimes you've got old content that is put on a letterbox DVD, and maybe that's the only way to see it. Actually use this function when watching the old Toy Story spin-off Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. They never released that to streaming or Blu-ray. That's really bizarre. You got this film from a major studio that was a big deal at the time, a lot of merchandising and stuff, but it's never seen a proper release. The only release is a DVD with the widescreen black bars baked in, letterbox, so it's pretty low resolution. And it was slightly off, so I was able to adjust the shape to look proper, at least shape-wise, on the screen. Now as for 3D settings, you can go into that under the picture settings. 3D mode, 3D perspective, 3D depth. We'll get into that perspective and depth later, because that's a on other TVs as well. The option to switch left right, if I I don't know why you would need to use that, but maybe if you're watching a YouTube video or something that was put in cross-site format, that's the only thing I can think of, or a genuine mistake. But before you say just press the button on top of your glasses to switch it, doesn't do that, at least not with these. I know it does do that with my DLP glasses for my projector. You can switch just by tapping the power button, swap left and right views, but not with these. It's just a power button. It also has the 3D to 2D. Okay, if you want to step backwards, go ahead. And it does do 2D to 3D conversion, so-called. It's not, however, dynamic. It's not like some AI thing that's processing really powerfully to convert. It's just a static, slight pushback into the screen. Kind of like I had a 32-inch Sony, active Sony years ago. It did the same thing. It wasn't dynamic conversion. It was just pushed it back a little bit. So how does it look playing back 3D content, like from a 3D Blu-ray? It looks excellent. Obviously, 3D Blu-rays are only 1080p, but it translates very well to a 4K screen. It looks beautiful. You will get some ghosting on high contrast scenes or scenes with extreme depth. I'm not sure if you really can fully get around that on flat panels. And it's not a sync issue, because they sync very well. If you've got something with normal amount of depth, you don't notice any flicker or anything like that. It's just things with high contrast, like white on black, things like that. I threw some hard images at it on purpose. Or hyper stereo with like extreme depth that most movies aren't even made at. Like some pictures I took deliberately as hypers. So you'll get some ghosting with that, but it's passable. It's doable. But it's about the amount you'd get on pretty much any flat panel. At least the ones I've seen, like from Sony and Vizio. And now moving on to a passive 4K 3D TV. These ones are harder to find. This was a LG 65 UF 8500. 10 inches bigger, 65-inch, passive 3D. And these use the same type of glasses you get at the movie theater. But personally, when I've used RealD in the past at home, it gives a sort of a yellowish, greenish tint to the whole thing. So higher quality glasses are in order. And this has also a mouse function on the remote. This center button with a wheel. It's a little unwieldy compared to Samsung's. I found much more tricky to use, and also you have to click the directional pad to make the mouse arrow go away, as opposed to the Samsung. So I just found it much more awkward. But the thing that it is more efficient in is a shortcut to 3D. For instance, when you want to watch side by side, over, under, or 3D conversion, with the Samsung you had to press menu, up, side a few times, click on 3D, and then it'll go black, and then 3 options will pop up, and you select the right one, and it'll go into that mode: conversion, side by side, or over under. With the LG, you've got the dedicated 3D button, and this brings up basically the same options. Now, one of the differences is that the 3D conversion is dynamic. It actually does run an algorithm that apparently is more computation heavy to actually be content aware and convert it. But there's only so much you can do in real time. It's obviously not close to where AI is getting nowadays with creating more accurate depth maps. Some shots can work out good, and I tested on different types: animation, live action. It just most of the time does not work well and creates glaring anomalies. But thankfully it's not dialed up, so by default it's subtle, so it seems to work a little bit better. And of course, the 3D shortcut also brings up over, under, and side-by-side options. Now this kind of takes us into resolution. Um, in the day of 1080p 3D sets, the thing with passive sets was that because every other line is polarized differently for each eye, you would have the resolution for your full HD 3D content. So it'd basically be 540p. But with passive 4K sets, when you're watching a Blu-ray 3D disc, you got uh, twice as much pixels as you need because you get full 1080 in vertical and 2 times as much than you need in horizontal. And because the pixels are smaller in comparison, with the older passive sets, when I demoed one in a store and later got one, I demoed an LG in Best Buy, and they had the glasses propped up on a stand where I could take a look at 3D content running, and they didn't think it through very well because they put it too close to the TV, and it actually wasn't that close, but it was a big screen, and you could see the black lines running through from that loss of resolution, and that just killed the 3D effect for me. And later when I got a Vizio, I only got a 42-inch, and you could see the same thing when you got closer to the screen, but sitting farther back like I was at that time, like 9 feet or so, it looked just great, no problem at all. But with 4K, it's nice you can actually sit closer to the screen and not have that loss in resolution, and not see those that some might call it a form of the screen door effect, or those black floating lines. And just like over-under format would be optimized for a passive 1080 set, because then you wouldn't notice any loss in resolution, the same can be said of 4K 3D content. If you were to watch a 4K 3D video in SBS format, you'd basically be seeing it in full HD because you're losing half the horizontal resolution and then you're losing half the vertical from the polarization. On the Samsung, it doesn't matter because with active you see the whole thing. But if you want to watch a 4K 3D content, I guess maybe something you make yourself or something somebody else has made because no commercial films have been released that way, or your photos, then if you want to see it in as much, if you want to see it in half 4K or double the resolution of 1080p, then over under is the way to go. Anyway, it's just quite unfortunate that they haven't released any commercial content in this format because it looks stunning to have twice the resolution of 1080p in 3D at the same time. And you can also do high frame rate too. With Blu-ray 3D, you're maxed out at 24 frames a second at full HD. If you want 60, you'll have to go down to 720p. But with 4K, I've rendered test videos at 4K 60 frames a second, and wow. It's just sad this isn't being done. And then new things will come out like the Apple headset, and it's like this. They always pretend whenever there's new 3D technology, they pretend, oh, this is our innovation. This is brand new. This has never been done before. It's never been possible before. Kind of like they did with 4K Blu-ray, 2D obviously, but they tried to pretend like Dolby Atmos and 60 frames a second were new upgrades for this format to try to add some artificial value to it. But both of those things are compatible with regular Blu-ray. So just kind of a shame they aren't making use of what technology is already there to distribute movies that are actually filmed this way in a better quality than they are now, but it is what it is. This also, of course, has the 3D settings, typical of switching left and right, of turning 3D off altogether. And it also has, what I mentioned earlier, a couple of different 3D settings. In this case, they're called 3D depth and 3D viewpoint. I've said it before in other videos, say it again. You cannot adjust, you can't increase or decrease the depth of native 3D content. If you missed it the first time, I'll explain it again. 3D content on a 3D Blu-ray disc is simply the left view and the right view. That's it. Your brain does the rest. It's just like looking at things with our two eyes. That's all it is. So if you see a plus and minus or increase 3D depth or lower it on your remote or in settings, that's not what it's doing. It can't be done. All it's doing is moving them together and apart from each other, aligning them, and which that virtually is doing is moving the focal point of where those 3D images meet to at the screen, in front of the screen, or behind the screen. So it's taking that baked in amount of depth, however much it is, a little bit, a lot, whatever, and it's moving that window forward, moving it back, or wherever in the window you decide to put it. And that can have different effects. For instance, if you move something in the front closer to the middle of the screen, closer together, whatever's in the back will get farther apart. It could be too far apart to fuse or to look good. And the same thing if you move something forward too much, things on the side could create a window violation on the edge of the screen that just looks unpleasant. So generally, 3D Blu-rays are made to, when they're mastered, to look their best. They're already chosen where the alignment is going to be. So that's not something you would typically mess around with. So how does that relate to these settings, 3D depth and 3D viewpoint? Well, when you're watching native 3D content, such as from a Blu-ray, I tried both, and they both did the same thing. The only thing they could do, which is what I just described. However, when you're using the 2D to 3D conversion, that's a different story, because with LG, like I said, it's dynamic conversion, for better or for worse. And the 3D viewpoint, that will do what I just described, but 3D depth will actually increase or decrease the amount of the depth in the conversion. They already put it sort of at a happy balance, because if you turn it up, obviously you're going to be turning up the anomalies, turning up, exaggerating, amplifying the errors, which will always be there. And an interesting thing they also have is different 3D modes. The difference between standard and sport, I can't tell, really. Both very minimal depth. Cinema has just a little bit more, and Extreme has a lot more, and also pushes it beyond the screen. All in all, these aren't things I would actually use. Maybe some people do. I suppose it looks better with some content than others, but it's not really something I personally care about. But otherwise, for watching good 3D content from a Blu-ray, this LG just looks stunning. The colors, the blacks, and watching Avatar 2, and that just looks amazing with 3D. And this has motion interpolation, like many TVs do, and it works very well in 3D. From the character's movement to sweeping shots, definitely panning shots, obviously, is what it mostly improves, but even subtle things, particles flying through the air, just looks beautiful in this passive 3D at full resolution. But I just couldn't get past the ghosting. The LG has worse ghosting than the Samsung. The Samsung was just in extreme situations of depth and contrast, but the LG obviously was with that, but also just about anything. It had ghosting with just about anything. Some scenes were better than others. But for instance, if there was ghosting here and I moved my head over to view it from a different angle, then that ghosting would look better, but it would get worse in another area. And going back a little bit further helped. But I don't know how far back you can go. That kind of defeats the purpose of a 4K screen. And it's I'd prefer to see the entire picture without ghosting at the same time. I suppose if you only have ever watched 3D on flat panels, that might be something you're used to more or less. But this was more egregious, and I did hear from another user of the same model that they had issues with ghosting as well. And I'm definitely spoiled for my BenQ projector, which has ghosting. None. Yeah, and I mean, I've thrown the hardest stuff at it, and there's just no ghosting. So it's not an active thing, it's not a passive thing. I've heard that before. Some say, oh yeah, you'll get ghosting with active, or you'll get ghosting with passive. Apparently not. It's really down to the display itself, the individual model, some cases unit, I suppose. and other factors, but it's not an active or passive thing. And I've also heard regarding the OLEDs from LG, which this isn't. This is just a normal LED. But there were models after this, the following year, that had HDR, where OLEDs supposedly look even better. And I've heard that they had almost no ghosting. Now, personally, I find that hard to believe, especially with HDR being involved, that there could be no ghosting. And I really doubt there is compared to a projector, especially being backlit. But I do believe that it was significantly better. And hopefully I can make a valid opinion on that by actually observing one someday. Now, those are super hard to find. Um, look beautiful. I just can't get past that ghosting, though, which is a real shame. A Samsung, I have that and I use that as a computer monitor. And that's very useful because I can test my videos as I'm uh, editing them. I render tests and I check it out in real 3D. And I can also test at 4K 3D with that as well. But my projector, that's what I use for the real watching, for movies and stuff. All right, see you next time.